What up, Wizards? It's Dev from the place, along with Igby. He's been here most of spoiler season. I just haven't really pointed him out, but you have been my rock this previous season, my guy. But anyway, today we've got the last planned day of content creator previews for the Avatar Mtg set. Now, all that said, there may be a few more cards coming down from the mothership tomorrow morning, but tonight, around 8 p.m., maybe 8:30 or so EST, we're going to get on twitch.tv/spmtgdev, and we are going to rate every single card we've got in this set so far, which is basically the entire set. So if you've got a free second, come on over there. If you don't worry. The video is going to get uploaded to YouTube real quick. But I'm done with my plugs. Just make sure you sub to the channel for all that content. But we have got to go ahead and look at these, I don't know, 17, 18 cards, something like that we've gotten to see so far today. And just like most of the other days in previous season, they really didn't skimp on the good stuff today, man. We've got a couple of really good legends that are good outside of just Commander. It looks like at least one of them may be really standard playable, and perhaps more, but we'll get to that. And then we got to see the last couple of monocolored lands that you might as well play in most decks anyway if you're running basics. So those are pretty exciting, and these are some of the best of the bunch. So let's go ahead and get into it. We got a lot to look at. Now we start off with 6 commons today, a little bit more than usual, but a couple of these look stacked. That said, the prize for least exciting cards of the day definitely go to Water Tribe Captain and Foggy Swamp Vinebender. At least I get to say Foggy Swamp. It's like my favorite thing in this set. But Water Tribe Captain is just 3 mana. It's 2 and a white for a 3/3 human soldier ally. If you pay 5 mana, creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. I feel like, especially with a name like Water Tribe Captain, haven't seen the show, but this should probably waterbend for this ability, especially if it's going to cost so much mana. That's a lot of mana for this ability, but at least you get an ally. At least it's a 3 mana 3/3. Again, this isn't the most embarrassing thing in Limited or anything, but it's also, a big for the most part. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to Foggy Swamp Vinebender. This is 4 mana, 3 and a green for a 4/3 human plant ally that cannot be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Now you can waterbend this ability. The green guy you can waterbend on. This is waterbend 5. Put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Activate only during your turn. So, okay, this gets a little bit larger throughout the game and can't be chump blocked. But again, still not super exciting despite the fact that it may be a solid limited card from time to time. Speaking of, we got Canyon Crawler and Porcupine, which I actually think is pretty alright. But Canyon Crawler over here is fine too, and limited at least. 6 mana, 4 and double black for a 6/6 Spider Beast for your Spider deck. This has Death Touch, and whenever it enters, you get a food token. You can also Swamp Cycle it away for 2 mana. So, again, not the most exciting. I wouldn't describe it as exciting or anything, but it is a solid card in Limited because these things that cycle for a basic land are usually at least somewhat playable, especially at pre-release, and especially if you can rustle up some sort of reanimation effect. They tend to be really good. A 6/6 kind of already functionally has Death Touch when you think about it, so I'm not I'm not too in on the Death Touch, but at least it does have a keyword ability. And the food token doesn't look like much either, but there's plenty of ways to sacrifice artifacts and stuff in this format. And for what it's worth, I guess if you have firebending, you can use the firebending mana to sack the food. There's a few reasons why you might want a little artifact token in the limited environment. So it covers a few different bases, and if all else fails, just a huge guy. So altogether, not too bad. But Porcupine is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/2 Boar Porcupine. I really like this thing's name, by the way. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. That's fine. That is just fine. It has prowess, everlasting prowess in a way, and that's pretty cool. I kind of take that, especially in Limited. I will absolutely take that, but I'm actually willing to try this in a cube. I think in cube this is a neat little thing, and might replace Kiln Fiend and stuff like that if you do have a slot like that in your cube. But that's pretty esoteric talk that's narrowed to 7 people watching right now. I think this might actually be decent in very budget Commander decks. If you're going all the way, I don't think your Spellslinger deck really wants this if you're playing really expensive cards. But if you're trying to keep your Spellslinger budget down to $50-$60, I think this might be something you want to look at. It's not that bad. But the last couple of commons of the day are definitely the best ones, I think. We got Rumble Arena and Curious Farm Animals. The most powerful common of the day is Curious Farm Animals. But let's look at Rumble Arena here. This is a land with Vigilance. You can't make it into a creature on the card. There's no on-card way to make it into a creature, but it does have Vigilance. When it enters, you scry 1. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it to add a mana of any color. So we've seen a few things like this. It's got Crystal Grotto vibes, and again, a couple of other cards. It is not uncommon to see a comes into play untapped scry 1, tap for colors. Again, we've seen a few of these. And as a matter of fact, we have one now that surveils when it comes into play and taps for colorless. And that one's really good. But this one's cool because, you want to turn it into a land because it has the vigilance. That's nice. It can attack and also tap for mana. You don't see that every day. And for what it's worth, this is kind of a small wrinkle for limited play, but you can attack with it and then use it to do stuff during your combat step. And there's a lot of ways to do that in limited because firebending is a thing. So they kind of plugged in a lot of ways to spend mana during your combat step. So that might actually be somewhat relevant on a card like this. Either way, again, just not a super embarrassing land. We've seen stuff like this see play before. And if you happen to be earthbending or in other ways turning your lands into creatures and you have the extra upside of a vigilant land for whatever reason, maybe you want that. I just think it's pretty cool. But Curious Farm Animals, again, I think is the most powerful common of the day. A single white mana for a 1/1 boar, elk, bird, ox. It's a lot of creature types. When this creature dies, you gain 3 life. All right. You can pay 2 and sack it. Oh, nice. To destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So, not too bad. You get kind of an insidious fungus. Is that the name of the card? A little green 1-drop guy. You got that guy in a way, but also a way to gain some life. And it's 3 life. So it works pretty nicely with stuff like Halia, which wants you to gain 3 life every turn. And then you draw cards, right? I guess there's also like Griffin Airy and life gain decks and Commander or something that want you to gain specifically 3 life. That's not so bad either. And there's a couple of other effects like this as well. So like it in those applications, but still just like a 1-mana guy that you block with and gain some life. Like it could be way worse. And if you don't, have the ability to block with it, or you'd rather use its activated ability, it sacks itself. So destroy a guy and gain 3 life. Like you take a block, you sack him on blocks, you destroy an artifact or enchantment, and you gain 3 life all at the same time, while still, again, making sure a creature gets blocked for at least 1 turn. Altogether, that's a solid little guy, man. And it's another piece from my Stardew Valley deck. Eventually, we're going to put that thing together. Well, let's move up a rarity slot here, and something has to head up the uncommons. I think this time it needs to be Vengeful Villagers in Meteor Sword, which I actually do think is kind of cool, but we'll start with Villagers. This is 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 3/3 human citizen. Whenever it attacks, choose target creature an opponent controls. Tap it, then you may sacrifice an artifact or creature. If you do, put a stun counter on the chosen creature. So a hill giant combined with a tapper, which is pretty good. You get the tapping no matter what you do. You don't have to sacrifice a thing. But if you do sacrifice, a stun counter is really good value, man. They don't get to hit you on the crackback with that creature after they untap, and you effectively get like 2 attack steps with that creature tapped down. That's not too bad considering how this could effectively snowball, right? Like you tap a creature down, put a stun counter on it 1 turn, and then the next turn, you tap another creature down. While the first creature is still tapped down, you put a stun counter on another guy. So this could be a little bit better than it first reads in limited, where I do like tappers in general, but this is a little more expensive than the average tapper would cost. So I'm not willing to say it's like the top end of your aggro deck or anything like that, especially considering you have to come down on some board presence to get the full value. But that's where all these little like clues and foods and stuff in the set come in. I was talking about that on Canyon Crawler. Plenty of ways to sacrifice artifacts for value in this set, and this is one of them. So I do think overall that, especially in like pre-release, being able to keep creatures tapped down like this is really annoying and probably pretty decent. So I don't know, keep your eye out for it, and if you do play it in pre-release, report back to me. I want to know how it worked out. I don't want to spend too much time on this lame kind of card here, but I still think the more I look at it, the more I'm like, okay, this doesn't read like much, but like actual practical gameplay application, I bet this is like the most irritating card in the set. So we'll see, man. Maybe I'll play it at pre-release. But next is Meteor Sword here. Kind of a meteor golem, but a sword. This is 7 mana for an equipment that equips for 3. And when it enters, destroy target permanent. Equipped creature gets +3/+3. I do not love that it's 3 to equip this 7 mana thing. 7 mana, dude. You're going to make me pay 3 mana to equip? That's crazy. But anyway, man, destroy target permanent is always a fun line of text. We've had Meteor Golem, I think, through Foundations, if I'm correct, in Standard for a while. It doesn't do anything. It's not really a good, reanimator target, especially in a format where we already have, like, Bahamut. I'll just play Bahamut as a reanimator target. So I don't think this really does much of anything. Maybe there's a equipment deck that's able to play an equipment like way ahead of schedule for whatever reason and might see some play. But all that said, I still don't think this is good, like, at all in Standard, but I kind of want it to be. There was a time where Meteor Golem was a playable commander card, and I hear tale that some people still sometimes slip that thing into their decks, depending on how much mana they're making and how much they care about artifacts. So this might just be another way to play Meteor Golem in Commander, and that should be more exciting than it actually is. So, I don't know, man. I like the design of the card. I like the callback, but as far as the actual like practical playability on it, it's probably not too high. But let's kick it up at least one notch in terms of what I think is playable. Let's look at Ruinous Waterbending and Air Nomad Legacy. Now, Waterbending is 3 mana, 1 in double black for a sorcery speed lesson. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may Waterbend 4. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If the spell's additional cost was paid whenever a creature dies this turn, you gain 1 life, which is actually kind of cool. And I kind of respect the waterbending costs on this, because if some of your creatures are going to die anyway, you might as well tap them down. Like, I think the waterbending cost is actually kind of easy to pay, which is why it looks a little steep. Waterbend 4, like, geez, man, I got 7 mana for this spell. Well, if your 3 guys are going to die, then this is really 4 mana. In a way, or maybe you have a random artifact to tap down or something, which is something else that random artifacts are good for, by the way. It's waterbending. Just, again, prioritize a little bit these stupid little artifact tokens in this set. They might be a little bit better than you think at pre-release, but still, the reason I've got this in my, like, almost playable pile in the uncommons today is because typically these, like, infest effects are okay on their face, and if they have good enough gravy on top of them mashed potatoes, then they're delicious. And this might be okay in a deck that's either looking to gain some life, or regardless of whether you're looking to gain life, this could just be good against aggro. Like, you take 3 things off the table and you gain a couple of life, and you could be happy with that result. So altogether, I think it's a solid Magic card. I don't really think Breach is standard, but again, with these infest effects, sometimes they're sideboardable if they have the right extra modes, and this could, depending on the deck. But we'll look at Air Nomad Legacy up next. This is a white and a blue, just 2 mana for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, create a clue token. Sure. Creatures you control with flying get +1/+1, so a favorable winds or an Empyrean Eagle. I guess it's closer to favorable winds because it's only 2 mana for an enchantment. Now, it's harder to cast than a favorable winds, but it gives you the clue token. That's the blue, or I guess that's the white part of it. Who knows? But still, this is solid. It turns out that these, like, 2 mana Anthem effects aren't as playable as they once were, but that said, this is on an enchantment. That's harder to kill than a creature, but, I guess the downside of that is in your I want to play a bunch of flying creatures deck, this takes up your turn 2 or something. But I think you're more likely to play it on turn 4 or whatever, with like counterspell backup, or so you can play another creature. You already have creatures out for it to benefit. So again, on turn 3 or 4, I think this is actually like pretty decent, with Spell Pierce backing on turn 3 or something like that. So I like it. There have been a couple of spots where I've wanted favorable wins in this format, and it's cool that we now, thanks to Foundations, have this on turn 2 into Empyrean Eagle on turn 3. And that's pretty sick, actually. Like, they're both like a little bit fragile as far as Anthem effects go. But hey, if they kill this with like a disenchant effect or something like that, get lost, especially if they kill it with the get lost, you get like 3 artifact tokens all at once, and one of them will draw you a card and kind of help you replace the Nomad Legacy. So I don't know, dude. I think it's a solid card. I do, even though they're not as good as they used to be. I tend to really like 2 mana Anthem effects. You can squeeze them in on later turns and just immediately get some, juice out of them. So altogether, pretty decent. If you need the clue token, it gives you the clue token, and there's a lot of ways to leverage that. So very solid Magic card. But you want something solid, baby? I have got a winner right here. This is Accumulate Wisdom. Very likely the best uncommon of the day. There's one more I want to talk about after this. That's because I think it's just a really cool card. This, on the other hand, might just be dangerous. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an instant speed lesson. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of those cards into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Put each of those cards into your hand instead if there are 3 or more lesson cards in your graveyard. So, oh my goodness, you're talking about a 2 mana instant speed draw 3. That is the best lesson payoff I've ever seen in my life. Like, Strixhaven notwithstanding, and I imagine this will be one of the better Strixhaven, lesson payoffs, even when the next Strixhaven set comes out in a few months. Man, I really have some faith in this. I haven't loved most of the lesson stuff that we've seen so far. I acknowledge there are really powerful lessons in the set, but I haven't seen a ton of good lesson payoffs that I feel like are maybe standard playable or whatever. This, on the other hand, really incentivizes you to jam some lessons into your deck so that you can get the full value out of this. Even if you don't get the full value out of this, it's just kind of a anticipate, and that's fine. You know, are we actually looking at a strictly better anticipate? Yeah, more or less. Just really, really crazy looking card here. And I'm not saying Anticipate's the best card in the world, but when you give Anticipate the ability to draw 3 cards, and I will say you're not technically drawing them. So that might be good against any, you know, Sheldred or whatever, you know, Underworld Dreams style effects people have in Standard, right? Or, you know, Sheldred's not in Standard, but just in general. Sometimes not technically drawing the cards is a good thing. It's a worse thing for decks like, you know, that carry Prof's Eidetic Memory or whatever, but who's counting? There's just wanted to point that wrinkle out, I guess, but still, I'm freaking out a little bit because a 2-mana instant speed draw 3 that actually is a little more real than I think it looks. We've seen so many good lessons in this set, and you don't even have to cast them, man. Just mill them into your yard or something, and now you're drawing 3 for 2 mana. It's nuts, dude. Bonkers card. Love it a lot. But like I said, despite my excitement over a card that may turn out to be a little bit mid, we'll see. We're going to look next at what I think is the coolest uncommon of the day, and that is Low and Lee Twin Tutors. And they tutor. That's cute that they're tutors. That tutor. We'll get to how they do it in a second. I just need to tell you the mana cost and power toughness. This is 5 mana, 4 and a black for a 2/2 legendary human advisor. When Low and Lee enter, search your library for a lesson or noble card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle up. Noble creatures you control and lesson spells you control have lifelink. What a cool card. What a neat dude, man. I think that 5 mana is like too much, probably. That's why it's uncommon and not rare. If it were 3 or 4 mana, then we might be having a discussion. But 5 mana for a 2/2 is probably not exactly where you want to be. Even in Commander, I don't think you necessarily want this as a tutor, but it's just so neat that it can go and get any lesson. And thanks to this set, there are actually like banger lessons that you might want to tutor up. So it's good for that. Or nobles. I don't know off the top of my head that I have ever seen a noble payoff. You know, like in Magic the Gathering, you don't see a whole lot of noble decks. And I think that there are, you know, sneakily, subtly enough nobles to make like a neat little commander deck or something like this, where this is your commander. If you do play it multiple times out of your command zone, then you're going and tutoring multiple things in a game, and that's pretty sick. Noble creatures having lifelink is almost justifying the 5 mana cost, depending on like how many nobles you have out when you play the spell in the first place. So, I don't know, dude. There's just a lot I like about this, and none of it is necessarily playability. It's just like a neat commander to build around. You can build it in Pauper Commander. I don't know if you can do anything good with it there, but you can try to build it in Pauper EDH. But apart from that, just this is one of those things where like design sometimes, you know, is of a higher priority to me than how playable the card actually is. And I think this is just a really neat design that's kind of hyping a creature type that doesn't really get that much hype. It's pretty cool. But if you dare, let's look at the rares. And we're actually going to start with the Mythic, bringing up the rear of the rares today. It's Phoenix Fleet Airship, in case you didn't get enough airships in the Final Fantasy set. This is 4 mana, 2 and double black for a 4/4 vehicle with flying. At the beginning of your end step, if you sacked a permanent this turn, create a token that's a copy of this vehicle. As long as you control 8 or more permanents named Phoenix Fleet Airship, this vehicle is an artifact creature. But in case you wanted to do it the old-fashioned way, you can just crew it for 1. So a 4 mana 4/4 flyer that takes 1 creature to crew, almost any creature to crew, is not terrible in and of itself, but you got to do better than just a 4 mana 4/4 flyer. Okay, what if you got a bunch of them? What if you had so many of them? I think 8 is certainly enough. 8 is a lot to ask, man. It's going to take all game to get that working. But I do think, that this is a limited bomb. This is absolutely ridiculous in that environment, which is maybe one of the reasons that it is Mythic in the first place, because dang, even 1 copy of this on the table in limited is absolutely nuts, and really difficult to deal with. I mean, this applies to Standard too, but the moment you get 1 copy of it, well, you know, now your opponent has to blow up both of them. If they draw the removal spell for one of them, it kind of doesn't matter. You know, it really doesn't matter. And the fun thing about that is, let's say you have like 2 of them swinging in at the same time. Your opponent targets one with a removal spell. You just cast like Village Rites or some effect like that. Well, look at that. I draw 2 and I have sacked a permanent this turn. So I'm going to get another copy. I just think that, you know, once you get a couple of these out, it becomes a real problem. And then, you know, especially 3/4 will clock your opponent real quick. So this might be a little bit better than I'm giving it any credit for. But at the same time, you know, there's a lot of competition in the 4-drop slot in Standard, even after after Sheldred rotated out. So we'll have to wait and see, but I want more faith in this than I currently have. That said, I'll acknowledge one more time that like once this starts copying itself, it becomes like really difficult to deal with. And by the way, just last thing on this, I should just point out, because somebody in the comments will if I don't, which is fine. I guess I should probably leave it for engagement, but I've already started the sentence. If you do have 2 copies of them and you sack a permanent, well, then you get 2 more. And if you sack a permanent during the next turn, you get 4 more. So maybe it's a little bit easier to get to 8 than I think. It could actually be a wild card, and I've kind of got my eye on it now. But we'll move on to Toph Hard-Headed Tutor here. This is 4 mana, 2 a red and a green for a 3/4 legendary human warrior ally. When it enters, you may discard a card. If you do, return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Whenever you cast a spell, Earthbend 1. If that spell is a lesson, put an additional +1/+1 counter on that land. So a couple of reasons I like this. A couple of reasons I don't. 4 mana 3/4 is not necessarily the best stat line at that cost. I think this is much more of a commander than it is a standard card, but this could be another one that surprises us because I like both things that it does. First of all, I can't recall having seen too many Gruul cards in my life that do this very decidedly blue thing, return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. You do have to pitch a card for it, but I don't know. There's ways to turn that into an upside. Maybe you just got a random land, who cares? But, well, you should be earthbending your lands, so you might care. But either way, pitch a random card and get an instant or sorcery back, which this is green and red. It's a really unique thing for a Gruul card to do. Kind of break the color pie slightly there, but I don't mind a slight color pie break. I'm always excited by them. However, the other thing is really you just play Magic and you earthbend. And you're only earthbending 1 unless you're casting lessons. This is a halfway decent lesson payoff, but oh boy, you get a 2/2 instead of a 1/1. I mean, it is a difference, but it's nothing to write your mom about. That said, whenever you cast a spell, do a thing is always exciting, and it's always pretty powerful. You're just rewarded for playing Magic. You're effectively creating a creature. It's basically whenever you cast a spell, make a 1/1 dude. It's just not a terrible line of text. And again, Earthbend is a good ability because it'll protect those things from removal in a way. You still get your lands back if your opponent kills your creatures. So altogether, man, I think it's a neat package that is, again, probably more worth like building around in Commander than it is trying to do in Standard. But both of these things are like pretty powerful abilities, what it does. So I don't know, man, maybe we'll give it a shot. I've noticed I've liked most of the Toph cards that I've seen so far. She seems pretty cool, and I still haven't watched the show, but I don't know, when she first appears on screen I'll be like, I know her. But anyway, when I do watch the show. But we'll move on here to Ko the Face Stealer. That's a cool name for a guy. This is 6 mana, 4 and double black for a 6/6 legendary shapeshifter spirit. When Ko enters, exile up to 1 other target creature. Nice. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you may exile it. Cool. Pay 1 life and choose a creature card exiled with Ko. Ko has all activated and triggered abilities of the last chosen card. So it doesn't have all abilities, period, but it does have all activated and triggered abilities of the chosen card, which is pretty cool. This shouldn't be 6 mana because it's supposed to be good against Vivi in Standard. I don't think that's why it was designed specifically, but if this were like 3 or 4 mana and had less PT or something like that, balance it out, then this would just be a Vivi killer of a card. And it's probably not that at 6 mana. I mean, I guess you could reanimate it, or maybe put it in your sideboard to reanimate against Vivi decks. So there's that. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, I think that Vivi might be banned in like less than a week here. So we'll see, man. We're getting really close to the announcement. But one way or the other, the card in a vacuum, despite what the meta looks like, is pretty cool. I think that 6 mana is a little steep for something like this, and we actually have some competition at 6 mana in black right now. There's a few things. I want to play like Primal Odin or whatever. That could be better than this, but this still takes something out the moment it comes into play, which is always a desirable ability. And the fact that now your opponent doesn't get death triggers, your opponent can't reanimate stuff, your opponent, when their Vivi does die, they don't get to do anything with it. They don't get to Soul Cauldron stuff because it's in their yard. Just altogether, that is a good line of text. Period. And then I guess the thing that the card actually does, like the flavorful thing the card does. I haven't seen the show, but I assume this is the flavor. Being able to get activated and triggered abilities could be good, but it also could be nothing. Depending on who you're playing against. So, again, wait and see on this one, but ultimately my call is that 6 mana is a bridge too far. But let's take a look next at Zhao the Moonslayer as we get into the top 3 cards of the day. I'll do some reloads and see if there's some new cards by the time it's all said and done, but For what it's worth, these next 3 cards look pretty ridiculous to me. They're the best cards of the day. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/2 legendary human soldier with menace. Non-basic lands enter tapped. Okay. Pay 7 mana to put a Conqueror counter on Zhao. As long as Zhao has a Conqueror counter on him, non-basic lands are mountains. So, you get a Blood Moon. Okay. That's kind of cool. But I just like this for every other thing it does. I think 7 mana, especially without any kind of cost reduction or water bending or whatever, is probably not good. Again, I'm not really paying that much attention to the build your own Blood Moon aspect of this card. It could happen from time to time, but whatevs, I think the cool thing about this is non-basic lands enter tapped. Like, is this powerful enough to be your 2-drop? In mono red, especially given the 2-drops that we have in mono red, Emberheart Challenger, we even have, Slickshot Show Off and a couple of other great 2s at the moment. So I'm not like convinced that this is good enough or aggressive enough really, but there sure are a lot of non-basics. There's so many non-basics in standard right now that I'm pretty sure that like 70% of the time you're going to catch them having to tap down their land when it comes into play on turn 3, which is really going to annoy them if they, waited until turn 3 to play their starting town and it's going to come to play tap now anyway, Chief. But one way or the other, yeah, I think non-basic lands enter tapped is very close to like Thalia levels of annoying, 2 mana Thalia. And also at the same time, it does have menace. So it may not look super aggressive as just a 2 mana 2/2, but maybe the menace makes it able to get through for a couple of more turns, especially considering you've just thrown your opponent off curve. They can't play the creatures they want to play. So again, just a really good package here that I think is going to be a solid kind of Staxy-ish 2-drop for the mono red decks that I'll go ahead and take a stand on it. I think you do plug this in day one and it has a real effect on standard. Mono red is already maybe the best deck in standard, if not the second best, right? So I'd say when you beat the best deck, you become the best deck. So I'd say we can definitely make an argument that mono red is. But, even though it's got a pretty tight deck list and it's already cruising in standard, I think it wants this pretty badly. But let's take a look at the last couple of mono-colored lands for the set. I've liked basically every single one of these. Let's see if we can keep the streak going here. With Abandoned Air Temple, this is a land that enters tapped unless you control a basic land. It taps for white, and in this case, the special mode is that you pay 3 white and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that you control. So I'm pretty sure that like a lot of white decks in Commander are going to want this. 5 effective mana is steep, dude. That's kind of steep. You're paying 4 mana plus tapping one of your lands down. So again, kind of a 5 mana ability here. But I think that it's worth it later on in the game in a lot of cases. In a lot of white decks in Commander, you still want to be casting spells pretty late into the game, especially double and triple spelling if you're in like a more aggressive pile. But, if you've draw dead, or if you run out of cards in your hand, which those decks are want to do, then this is just a great way to spend your mana. And white already has a lot of utility lands that are good ways of spending its mana. Castle Locthwain comes to mind, even Keldor and Outpost, and a couple of other things. But I still think this makes the cut, even outside of maybe even mono white decks. You got your Boros decks and stuff. You'll still control a basic land, and you'll still want this ability in a very aggressive kind of Boros deck. So kind of a fan of this, man. I think that this is one of the more expensive ones to activate that we've seen so far, but that's because it's a really powerful ability on the right board state. And again, in Commander specifically, it's not too hard for the decks playing this card to generate the kind of board state that wants it, especially tokens and stuff, obviously. This is just absolutely wild in. So, a card with extremely, extremely, extremely low opportunity cost that'll sometimes just break the game wide open is something I want to be playing. So, good guy. But Realm of Ko is the last one of these that we'll see for the set. This one enters tapped unless you control a basic land and taps for black. You can pay 3 and a black and tap it, so same effective mana value as the last one we looked at, to create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token with this token can't block or be blocked by non-spirit creatures. So you get one of these with Spirit Shadow. 4/5 really effective mana is probably too much for this, but at least it's a token, creator, and token creators are always good. Black also, by the way, has a lot of utility lands that it's using mana for, right? Did I say Castle Locthwain earlier? I'm pretty sure that's the black land. Yeah, Castle Locthwain's the black land, but it does use that. But Castle Ardenvale is what I meant for the white one. Anyway. For some reason, it popped back into my brain. Like, no, it's this. But one way or the other, yeah, Castle Locthwain is a good example. And you might also be using your mana to tap down your Balrath Stronghold, your Cabal Coffers, or whatever it is. So, I don't know if Black has all the mana in the world for every utility land in existence, but this is still a pretty decent one some of the time, because at least it gives you something to do with your mana, and it makes tokens that, probably allow you to get through for damage on most people. So, might be something you consider playing. I don't think it's quite as good as some of the other ones we've seen, but I'll take a Creature Factory every day. But that is all ski Kowalski for now, at least. I got a lot of work to do in the next few days, man. Not only do I have to rate every card on Twitch tonight, but got to get to work on sleeper videos, top 10 commanders, top 25 competitive cards, hang out with my buddy Power Dragon and talk about the over and underrated cards in the set. There's a lot to do. So again, make sure you sub to the channel for all the content, and come on over to Twitch tonight if you've got, I don't know, a couple of free hours, and hang out with us and rate these cards, because usually I ask chat to help me rate these cards too. So you want to be part of the experience, come on over, baby. You can also like this video. So looks like that. If you need like a visual reference, it looks a little bit like that. You can also hype the video. Apparently it actually does do something. I don't know. If you got an extra 2 seconds, maybe give that a shot, and you can subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. I have a Patreon. I know it's a lot to ask, but all I really need is $1 a month from you, and you get to vote on what content we do when we get to Avatar deck season, which is in I don't know, a few days. So go ahead and get on in there and secure your spot so that you can vote on these decks. But that's all I've got for this one, y'all. I am Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.